So today we're going to talk about the hiring process, which is probably one of the most difficult part of building a team, is selecting the right people to become part of your team. And if you're new to this channel, I would really invite you to subscribe to our channel. So hiring and building a team is probably one of the most difficult parts of building any kind of enterprise. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today are some thoughts and ideas that I've learned over the years. So when I go back into the first few years I was in practice, I had come to the conclusion that I was not terribly good at hiring, because I would hire, say, 3 people and end up firing 2 of the 3. So my batting average was less than good. But over the years, I've refined my hiring process to a point where I feel I've become extremely good at selecting the right person to join our team. So today I'm going to share you just a few of those ideas. And obviously, learning how to hire or doing a session on how to hire would be a several-hour session. In fact, it would probably be a whole day. So today I'm going to really summarize some of the key points. And hopefully you're going to find something out of that you'll be able to use in your practice in hiring a better team for your organization. So part of the hiring process is to be able to hear the right information from the candidates you're interviewing to make part of your team. So that's always easier said than done. But one of the things that I've learned and got better at was to hear past what they were saying. In other words, to read between the lines and try to get a sense of what they're really saying with whatever they are in fact saying. And so you've got to learn to pay more attention to things like body language, eye contact, and all of these non-verbal cues that might shed some light as to what they're saying, how truthful they are, and how sincere they are. But all that is an art, and it comes with practice. And it's something that you will get better and better at as you do it. But I still want to share with you some of the questions that will maybe bring those things a little bit closer to light and helping you in the selection process. So one of the first things that I think you got to be aware of is, before you start the hiring process, is are 2 things. One is you got to be very clear as to what you're looking for, by way of character, skill sets, education, and all that. And that seems fairly obvious, but not necessarily followed through quite well enough with a lot of employers. But the second thing that you have to overcome and become very aware of is your prejudices. And you may say, well, I'm not prejudiced, so it's not a problem. I would disagree. I think we all have certain prejudices. We all have those prejudices that will impact how we hire. So you got to be aware of those things. So I'll notice, for example, you're going to have people who hire an all-female team. Well, that to me sheds some light that you may have a prejudice right there, or an all-male team, or whatever. But if you find that your team is all very similar, it may lead to the fact that you are, without even knowing, somewhat prejudiced. So you got to be aware of those things and keep that under cue when you're doing the hiring. So I'm going to give you some ideas on how to overcome that as well. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, when you do the hiring process and you've got the candidates sitting in front of you, the first thing I concentrate on is making sure that the candidate is very at ease. Get them to relax. And I find that the best way to do that is to talk about things that they are very familiar with. Because you got to keep in mind, they are probably very nervous, probably really wanting this job, and are not too sure what to expect. So the first thing I want them to do is to let their shoulders down and kind of relax. And again, the best way I found to do that is to talk about things that they're comfortable with. So usually on their resume, they'll often talk about their interests, things they enjoy doing, and things like that. So I usually start off by picking on some of those things. So if I notice that they're into music, I ask them questions. Well, I notice you got music as an interest, so tell me a little bit about that. And then I have them talk for a few minutes about things that are of really interest to them. And maybe talk about simple things like, so what did you do over the weekend? And things like that, just to get them to relax, so they kind of go, it's not so bad. It's a conversation and it doesn't feel like an interview. And you want the interview to really feel like a conversation and not like an interview, because that's when the colors of that person will really come out and you'll get a better sense of who they really are. So get them to relax. So once you've decided what you want, one of the things that I would suggest that you do is that you weigh how much you're going to put weight on things like technical skills, education, past experience, or even things like philosophy and core values. So when I was hiring, actually technical skills and education kind of went by the wayside. I was more interested in hiring based on core value, character, and philosophy. Because I always figured I can teach someone how to reconcile a bank or do whatever they're going to be doing for me. But it's very difficult to train someone to have the same core values as I do.
We're slow learners, and we're not particularly good listeners. That'll be a huge problem.
We're also slow learners.
The other thing that I think almost everybody overlooks is, who do you want as part of your team? Now, something that I only discovered probably in the last few years I was in practice. It took me years to come to this realization. And it's probably something that I've never seen written or discussed anywhere, is it's a good idea to hire people who will fill your tank. Because running a practice or running any business is extremely draining, because you're always on and always under the go, and it requires a tremendous amount of energy. And I've seen so many people burn out because of their team. And they're going to talk negatively about the team they have and how they just drain them for all they're worth. But the thing they don't realize is they're the ones who selected this team. So if they're so damn draining, why did you hire them? And the reason for that is because they put no emphasis or no thought about how this person might have an impact on their ongoing energy level. So one of the things I would strongly recommend that you do is you think about, how will the person that you're hiring impact you in the way you feel about coming to work? So more and more, as I hire people, I want to hire people that I know I'm going to enjoy working with, that I'm going to have fun with. So in the interviewing process, I try to find out, is that person someone that I could really have fun working with? And that will impact, believe it or not, the degree or how much, whether or not I'm going to hire that person. So, like I said, when I hire, I tend to first base my decision based on their core values, their philosophies, and how they jive with their way of thinking with me. Now, getting to that realization requires a fine-tuning of the questions that you may have. And this is where it gets a little bit difficult. So one of the things that I did many years ago, and it has served me really well, is let's first determine what are the characteristics that I'm looking for in an individual.
There's no jobs for manager, it's just for counter.
Good. I'm looking for the least possible amount of responsibility.
And at Talbot & Associates here at our firm, we had come up with 9 characteristics. So actually I had a team meeting and I asked people at the team, says, what do you guys want in a candidate? Never mind their skill sets, never mind their education. What do you want as far as characteristics? And once you've told me what those characteristics are, let's talk about those characteristics and let's find ways of asking questions to pull that information out. So for example, you may decide that some of the things you're going to be looking for is punctuality, integrity, things like a sense of humor, or how about the willingness to learn, caring. Those are all very separate characteristics that you want in a person. But there's probably a whole bunch more, so you got to decide for yourself, for your firm, what are those characteristics you're looking for. Once you've determined what those 5, 6, 10 things are, then from there you can develop questions that will pinpoint whether or not they are those things. But the way you ask the question is also important, because you may ask, for example, are you a caring person? Well, of course they're going to say yes. So the questions you ask must be more situational. So in other words, I will ask a question that will kind of, in their answer, help me determine whether or not they are caring people. And so put them in a situation and see how they react to the question. That will then give you a hint as to whether they are caring people or not. There are questions that are more difficult to ascertain in an interview as to whether they have those characteristics. So for example, for me, a sense of humor. For me, it's really important that whoever I'm hiring has a sense of humor, because I tend to joke and make fun of everything and anything. And so if they don't have a sense of humor, we're probably not going to get along too well. So having a sense of humor is extremely important. So then how do you determine if a person has a sense of humor? And if you ask them, do you have a sense of humor? They're going to say, yes, I do. So to give you an example of that, for example, one of the questions that we ask is as follows, is if you were a superhero, what would be your superpowers?
Any powers you want to tell us about?
No, I don't have one. I just saw the ad.
No superpowers at all.
I have both type 1 and 2 diabetes.
Ow!
Now, the question itself brings nothing to the interview. What I'm really looking for, how did they react to the question? So if they kind of go, if I had superpowers, what would they be? And they'd say, well, I'd like to get rid of world hunger. Well, okay, good answer, but it doesn't show my sense of humor. But if on the other hand, the person breaks down laughing, tells you, well, that's a really stupid question, I don't know how to answer that, and they come up with a really funny answer, that gives you a cue that they do have a sense of humor. So again, the answer to the question isn't that important. It's how they respond to the question, how they react to it, and the kind of feedback they get. So if they laugh at the question, it's kind of an indication that you do have a sense of humor. So when asking the questions, look for the reaction as much as the answer itself. Something to me that is really important is to really get to know the person and find out what really makes them tick. What turns them on, what turns them off. So some of the questions that I asked, for example, and I think those questions are phenomenal. A question like, tell me about the best job you've ever had and why it was your best job. And then the other question that I follow up with is, tell me about the worst job you've ever had and why. The answers to that are extremely telling. So for example, if I ask them, what is the best job you've ever had? And they say, well, the best job I've ever had was when I was working for this park. And what I really enjoyed about working at that park is it was an outdoor environment. They were very relaxed. They didn't really submerge us with too much work and so on and so forth. Well, that is not necessarily a great candidate for an accounting practice because number one, we're not outside, and number two, there will be pressure. But on the other hand, if you ask them about the best job they've ever had, and they say, well, I really liked working for this company because it was high maintenance, it was go, 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 it was like to the pedal to the metal at all times, and I was learning a lot, and they were expecting a lot of me, and all of that, and that really got me going. That is a terrific answer. That is the kind of people I want to have working for me. And so by the same token, when you ask them about the worst job they've ever had, if they say things like, well, I didn't like working for this store because all I did all day was almost nothing, clean the shelves, and I was constantly looking for work, and I was bored out of my mind, then you say, okay, that's a good thing, because you want people who are not going to want to be bored and who are looking for those challenges. So answers to questions like that will be very telling as to what kind of character they are and whether or not they are a fit for your team or not. So the interviewing process that we have is actually 4-part. And so I'm not going to expand on all 4 parts because that would make this video far too long. So I will just share with you the 4 parts. So the first part is to ask questions to develop a knowledge or a feeling about their character, their core values, their belief system, and all of that. The second set of questions are more technical. Now, believe it or not, the technical question is not to determine whether or not I want to hire them or not. Although I have to admit there are a few people where we did the technical part and knew absolutely nothing, so we kind of scratched them off. But by and large, most people will have okay technical knowledge, but what I'm trying to determine is to what extent I will need to train these people. So if they are unable to answer none of the technical questions, it doesn't necessarily mean that I won't hire them, as long as they've got a good basic knowledge to start with, because the rest I can teach. But the reason I'm asking the technical question is to give me an idea as to what should be the range of salary at which I'm going to start these people. So if they have absolutely no technical knowledge, then it makes the whole negotiation of wages a little bit easier, because they'll come to understand that I need to teach them a whole lot.
Do you have any experience?
No, sir, I have no experience, but I'm a big fan of money. I like it. I use it. I have a little. I keep it in a jar on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more in that jar. That's where you come in.
The third part of the interview, which I'm going to expand upon in another video, is to sell your firm. And I find two people are thinking when they're doing the interviewing process, it's all about me deciding whether or not I want to hire you. But you got to also understand that they got to make a decision whether or not they want to work for us, and whether what we're offering as a wage is reasonable for what they're going to get in return. So it's important that I sell my firm and my business to the candidate that I'm currently interviewing. And then, of course, part 4 of the interviewing process is the negotiations. And that comes in very narrowly with part 3, where we sell ourselves. So again, this will be discussed more in a future video. Now, there's a whole lot more to the whole hiring process. And like I said, this is really a one-day seminar at the very least. So I'm going to do several short videos and really dive in much deeper in all the little things that I'm sure will make a huge difference in how you hire. So stay tuned, and we're going to concentrate on that. And also, we're going to talk about in the next session about how to build a great team culture once you've hired those people. So stay tuned and watch for our next videos, where we're going to talk more about hiring and more about building a good team feeling and a good team culture. If any of you have any questions with regard to the hiring process, please don't hesitate to add it as a comment, and because that will also give me a little bit of insight onto future videos that you guys would like for me to discuss upon. So again, if you have any questions on how to hire, or problems that you've encountered when hiring that you would like to find a solution to, those are great comments for me to receive, because it gives me an insight as to what you guys are looking for by way of information and by way of me doing videos.